Ann Perez was a 33-year-old mother of three from Chalmette, Louisiana, who vanished on a spring night in 1976. On March 25, 1976, she left home to go out with a friend to a bar on the outskirts of New Orleans, entrusting her teenage daughter Donna to babysit her younger children. True to her word, Ann phoned home around 10:30 p.m. to let Donna know she was safe and would be back soon. But later that night, Donna received a second call from an unfamiliar woman calling herself Dorothy, who claimed that Ann's car had broken down. This excuse immediately alarmed the family, particularly Ann's brother, since her car was practically new and had no reason to break down. Ann never returned home that night, and she would never be seen alive again. The following day, police discovered Ann's car abandoned in the bar's parking lot, and 3 days later, her purse was found submerged in Lake Pontchartrain with a brick inside it. These clues strongly suggested foul play, but investigators had few leads to pursue. With only an empty car and a waterlogged purse, the case quickly shifted from a missing person search to a suspected abduction and slaying. Her family was desperate for answers, yet days turned into months with no trace of Ann. 8 months later, in November 1976, hunters stumbled upon human remains in a cornfield near Grand Bay, Alabama, just beyond the Mississippi state line. The skeletal remains were clad in clothing and clearly belonged to a woman. Investigators noted distinctive clues. The skull showed signs of prior injury consistent with a past car accident, and a partial dental plate was present with the remains. These details would later sound eerily familiar to Ann's family, who knew she had been in a car crash and wore a partial dental plate. At the time, however, Alabama authorities had no idea who their Jane Doe was. They sent her remains to a forensic lab in Oklahoma, hoping that would lead to a break in the case. Little did they know that it actually would, but they'd have to wait nearly half a century for that to happen. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here, so hold tight. In the 70s, there were no national DNA databases or interstate computer networks, and information sharing between jurisdictions was limited. No one in Louisiana connected the Alabama Jane Doe with Ann's disappearance, so the two cases remained separate mysteries. With no identification and no new leads, the trail in Ann's case went cold. In 1980, investigators got what would turn out to be a major break in Ann's case from an unexpected source. A drifter couple, David and Donna Courtney, were arrested for a multi-state crime spree and pleaded guilty to a number of slayings. As part of their confession, the Courtneys admitted they had abducted a woman in New Orleans in 1976, a story that sounded just like Ann's fate. David explained that he spotted a lone woman who was too intoxicated to drive at a bar outside New Orleans and offered to give her a ride home, which she accepted. Instead of taking her straight home, he brought the woman to the trailer where he and his wife were living, and there the victim fell asleep. The woman was then jolted awake by Donna's unwanted advances. When the startled woman grew upset and demanded to be taken home, the couple agreed to drive her, but by then they had decided she couldn't be allowed to live. According to David's account, as Donna drove the car, he strangled the victim from the back seat with a coat hanger. They dumped the body on a rural roadside near a state border, but when police later searched those areas, no remains were found. The Courtneys led authorities to the graves of several of their other victims, but in the New Orleans case, they couldn't pinpoint where they left the body. Without a corpse or any physical evidence, Louisiana prosecutors couldn't charge the couple in Ann's case. Officially, Ann remained a missing person, even though investigators now strongly suspected what had happened to her. In 1991, 15 years after her disappearance, the family received a strange phone call that briefly rekindled their hopes. A woman on the line claimed she was calling on Mary Ann's behalf, insisting that Mary Ann was still alive but not allowed to contact her family. Some relatives wondered if this could be true, speculating that Mary Ann had survived with amnesia or been held captive without any memory of her identity. Others suspected it was a cruel hoax by someone playing on the family's desperation. Either way, no evidence ever surfaced to support the caller's story, and Mary Ann's case remained in limbo with no closure. Over 40 years later, her children were grown adults, still waiting for answers, and the mystery of Mary Ann's disappearance was finally solved through a mix of persistence and luck. In the late 2010s, Mobile County Sheriff's Detective J.T. Thornton began re-examining cold cases in Alabama, including the unidentified woman found in 1976. A Mississippi investigator happened to mention Mary Ann's long unsolved missing person case to Thornton, prompting him to reach out to her family. When relatives described Mary Ann's prior car accident and her partial dental plate, Thornton immediately recognized those details as a perfect match to the Jane Doe. Thornton soon discovered that the Jane Doe's remains had never been buried, and the bones were still stored in Oklahoma, where they had been sent decades earlier. However, the case file and the remains had never been connected to Mary Ann until now. Then, by pure chance, an investigator from the Alabama Attorney General's office who specialized in cold cases contacted Thornton. He asked about the same unidentified remains, not realizing Thornton was already working that case. In that moment, they realized that Ann Perez and the Alabama Jane Doe were almost certainly one and the same. The remains were finally transferred to a Texas lab for DNA testing, and the results confirmed the remains were indeed from her. For Mary Ann's family, this revelation brought both relief and heartbreak. They had definitive answers at last, even though it confirmed the tragedy they had long feared. One of the perps, David Courtney, remains behind bars serving a life sentence. Donna Courtney died years before the case was closed and will sadly never face further justice for this horrific crime. On a warm June day in 1980, a gruesome discovery jolted Ada County, Idaho. A highway work crew found the body of a young woman hidden in tall grass beside Highway 55 near an irrigation ditch. Investigators soon identified the victim as 25-year-old Mary Tracy, a Boise resident who had been reported missing 2 days earlier. From the start, detectives faced a perplexing crime scene. The autopsy revealed Mary suffered at least 11 stab wounds, along with a fatal thrust to her heart and a blow to the back of her head. Yet oddly, there was little blood at the spot where her body was found, suggesting she might have been slain elsewhere and dumped by the roadside. An old scrap of newspaper was found stuck to Mary's face, and a bloody fingerprint stained the skin on her back. These curious details hinted that the perpetrator tried to clean up or move her body. Before long, rumors swirled that Mary's slaying may have occurred behind closed doors at a local motel. The Sunliner Motel, not far from where Mary was last seen, drew investigators' attention after a tip that a violent struggle had happened there. The motel's management initially denied anything unusual, but one maid disclosed that she had cleaned an unusually large amount of blood from a guest room around that time. Despite this lead, finding the perp proved extraordinarily difficult. Detectives questioned everyone in her life. Mary's estranged husband was initially a person of interest, but he had been hospitalized on the night of the slaying and was quickly ruled out. Neighbors reported seeing Mary arguing with an unknown man on a motorcycle the day she disappeared, a clue that raised more questions than answers. Police canvassed the seedy strip of clubs on Chinden Boulevard in Garden City, where Mary spent her final hours, hoping to find witnesses who might have seen her, or the mystery biker. Notably, Garden City is entirely surrounded by the city of Boise, but retains its own separate municipal government structure. Cops chased down rumors and interviewed motel staff and locals, but no solid suspect emerged. With only fragments of evidence and no one to charge, the case went cold. Months turned into years, then decades, and Mary Tracy's tragic end slipped into the realm of memory. For 43 years, Mary's loved ones waited for answers. Her daughter grew up never knowing who had slain her mother, and the ache of that uncertainty lingered. In 2023, Mary's family reached out to ask the Ada County Sheriff's Office to reopen the investigation. A cold case investigator, Detective Tim Cooper, was assigned in August 2023 to pore over the old files with fresh eyes. What he found buried in boxes of reports would finally break the case open. Cooper discovered a forgotten clue from the original investigation. A jailhouse snitch had once told police about a man bragging of a case that sounded eerily like Mary's. According to a handwritten note in the case file, an inmate named Jose claimed that back in 1980, his friend Chuck Strain confessed to stabbing a girl and dumping her body off a road. At the time, without physical evidence, that tip led nowhere. But now, decades later, it became a centerpiece of the renewed probe. Cooper even unearthed the old audio recording of the informant's interview, which confirmed key details. Jose had actually spoken with Strain at 11 p.m. on June 24, 1980, the very night Mary vanished, and Strain had explicitly mentioned dumping the body off Highway 55. Those facts uncannily matched the crime, elevating Strain to the top of Cooper's suspect list. Once Strain was in focus, his dark history began to spread across the case. Back in 1980, Strain was a drifter with a record of robbery across several states, but nothing indicated he was capable of such extreme violence. Not long after Mary's death, Strain's known history of violence escalated, indicating that Mary may have been his first slaying. In 1981, he kidnapped his own 10-year-old daughter and fled Idaho, evading authorities for years. Worse, that same year he took the life of his 16-year-old stepdaughter in a crime that wouldn't be solved until 1986. Strain was eventually convicted of that disturbing act and sent to prison in Utah, where he eventually died in 2007. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place with modern DNA technology. Back in 1980, forensic science had preserved crucial evidence from Mary's body containing the attacker's genetic material. In the wake of Cooper's discoveries, Ada County authorities submitted this old DNA evidence for advanced testing, specifically comparing it to Chuck Strain's profile. In a fortunate break, a sample of Strain's blood had been preserved by the medical examiner after his death, providing a direct source for comparison. By June 2024, the results came back from the state lab with a definitive answer. The DNA from Mary Tracy's assault kit matched Strain's DNA. After nearly half a century, science had caught up with this now deceased perpetrator. Though he would never face justice for Mary Tracy's death specifically, this resolution brought a long-awaited sense of justice for her family. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with a quick reminder to like, subscribe, and share this video. Also be sure to check out my other channels for more content related to unsolved mysteries and history. On the morning of September 20th, 1987, joggers in Dana Point, California made a grim discovery. The body of a young woman lay at the base of a steep seaside cliff. Sheriff's deputies arrived to investigate the unidentified victim, a Caucasian woman in her 20s with no ID on her person. It was initially unclear whether she had fallen by accident, been pushed, or done it all on her own. With no name to call her, authorities referred to the mystery woman simply as the Dana Point Jane Doe. a case that haunted investigators for decades. At the top of the cliff, investigators found several personal items left behind by the young woman. A small purse sat near a half-finished soda can, alongside a pack of cigarettes and a road map of Southern California. Importantly, a phone number written on the map led investigators to a local taxi company. The cab driver remembered picking up a quiet young woman that morning and dropping her off near the Dana Point Cliffs, since she had only $18 for the fare. Further investigation pieced together the woman's last movements. Staff at a nearby motel recalled that the young woman had come in, asking if there were any tall hotels in the area. Notably, this stuck out to them since it was a somewhat unusual request. Why was this woman so concerned about the height of the building she was staying in? Shortly afterward, she was seen at a gas station, where she used the restroom and then called for a cab. She told the taxi driver that her car had broken down and asked to go toward Laguna Beach, or as far as her money would take her. The driver let her out on a coastal road near the cliffs, which was as far as he could take her for $18. That was the last time anyone saw her alive, as she walked off into the darkness toward the cliff's edge. At dawn, her body was found on the beach below. Investigators noted that her belongings, the soda can, cigarette pack, map, and a slip of paper with a hotel phone number were left neatly just beyond the fence at the cliff top. The evidence strongly suggested she had climbed over and jumped intentionally. The coroner eventually classified her death as likely of her own doing, while holding out hope that discovering her identity might explain what led to that tragic act. One perplexing clue was the small purse found at the scene. It contained no identification, but on the outside was a name embossed in gold: Carol Pinkham. Detectives traced that name to a woman in San Diego County who was alive and baffled to learn her stolen purse had turned up at such a scene. She explained that it had been taken from her in the mid-1970s, over a decade before the incident, and that she had no connection to the Jane Doe. How the victim came to possess that stolen purse has remained an unsolved side mystery to this day. Also, just thinking about it, it's kind of weird to think about the chain of causation from that person stealing a purse in the 1970s to that act being featured on a YouTube video a half-century later. With that lead hitting a dead end, investigators had nothing to go on but the Jane Doe's description and the circumstances of her death. For years, the Dana Point Jane Doe remained nameless despite efforts. She was a young white woman in her 20s, tall and slender with long light brown hair and brown eyes. In 1995, the popular series Unsolved Mysteries aired a segment on the case, broadcasting the Jane Doe's composite sketch and details nationwide. Despite this massive signal boost, no one came forward with a name. Many years later, a breakthrough finally came from an unexpected source. Holly Glynn, a young woman from Whittier, had gone missing in 1987 around the same time as the Jane Doe was found. Decades later, high school friends searching for Holly stumbled upon the Dana Point Jane Doe case and noticed uncanny similarities. Suspecting the Jane Doe was Holly, they alerted authorities and missing person databases. By 2014, their campaign on social media prompted Orange County investigators to take a fresh look at the case. In early 2015, detectives collected DNA from Holly's relatives to compare with the Jane Doe's profile. In May 2015, nearly 28 years after the tragedy, the Orange County Sheriff's Department announced that the Dana Point Jane Doe was identified as Holly Glynn. DNA testing confirmed the match, giving a name to the victim at last. Holly had been only 21 when she died, and her family was finally able to learn her fate. The cold case mystery was solved. Holly had likely chosen to jump that night, with no foul play involved. Despite the case now being officially closed, some have speculated that the cab driver may have had some involvement in Holly's demise. After all, the circumstances under which he dropped her off are a bit unusual. That said, given that investigators found out that she was looking to find a tall hotel building, I support the official finding that this was likely an intentional act by Holly.